And The Walking Dad. So why are we talking about The Walking Dad this morning? Here's why. Because it's the same thing that we did for Mother's Day. Father's Day is next Sunday. Okay? Father's Day is next Sunday. That means, see, I'm going to share with you the same thing that I did for Mother's Day. For Mother's Day, we did our Mother's Day message a week ahead. Why did I do that? I did that because I like you guys. Because I love you and I like you, and I want your life to be long in the land that the Lord has given you. I want to give you a heads up, a week notice, that next Sunday is Father's Day. And I want you, the reason I'm doing that is because I want you to put some thought, some time, some effort into blessing your dad next Sunday. Having something for him, even if it's a card, even if it's a homemade card. He will appreciate it. This comes from a dad. I am a dad myself. And even if it's a homemade card, he will love that. I actually have a couple of places. I've got a special place at home, and I even have a special place, a file here in my office of things that my kids have made me over the years. The reason I would have one here at my office is because prior to being here, by the way, I've been here for 5 years now officially. I think that was on Friday or Saturday, my wife. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a great 5 years. It really has been a great 5 years. But prior to being here, I was on staff at a Calvary Chapel. And my kids would, as they were little growing up, they would always come into the office, and sometimes oftentimes I'd ride my bike to work, get a little exercise in. And, but they would ride with me or whatever. They'd be hanging out, and they would draw Dad a picture or color or whatever. And if it was at the office, I had a file, and I would put that in there, and those were special to me. And every once in a while, as I was going through my files, desperately looking for something, I would come across that file and pull that thing out and look through it. And but I've got one of those at home also where I keep things like that. And so I'm telling you all of that because even if you were to make your dad some kind of card, and some of you are crafty, go for it. It may seem corny to you because you're like, man, I'm 15, I'm 17, whatever. But let's not kid ourselves. You're broke. And so find some paper or whatever, make him something or do something special, whatever you can come up with. But bless him next Sunday, and we're going to talk about that because some of you might be thinking, you know what? Why in the world would I bless my dad? He's done such and such, or he's been such and such, or hasn't been these things, or hasn't done these things. But we'll talk some more about that. And as always, I don't know about always. That might be a lie. But as I did for Mother's Day, I've got books. These are brand new books. These are not used books, that I got at the thrift store, but even if they were, they'd still be cool. But some really good books, and so I've got 3 for this service, 3 for next service. And so at the end of our time together today, you will have a chance to work, to fight, to win one of those books so that next Sunday you have something to give your dad. Wouldn't that be cool? And you open it up and sign in there, hey, this is from Chandis or whatever, and I love you, and because I know she didn't get her dad nothing, But no, you can win a book and then give that to him, and so I picked out some good books, and so we'll do that at the end. All right? Yes? Let's open up to the book of Genesis. Would you do that? To Genesis chapter 6. This morning we are going to be looking at the life of Noah. And I say the life of Noah. We will not be looking at Noah's life, in depth. We will not be looking at his life thoroughly, but what we will be doing is, and this is something that we do not normally do when we're studying the Bible, or even the story of Noah. We're going to look at Noah's life from the perspective of a dad, him being the dad. And we're going to see how he operated and what he did with his own kids. And we will see the highs and we will see the lows. But I think that this kind of a study, not necessarily my study because, hey, I'm such a great teacher. What I'm saying is looking at the life of a father from the Bible, from the scriptures, is extremely important. And let me tell you why. Because maybe for good reason, but I think not entirely. Dads really are under attack these days, and really have been for years. It is hard to find a movie or a TV show or Netflix series or however you might choose to watch however you do your TV viewing. It is hard to find media with a dad that is representing a strong leader. So often, dads on our televisions or again, however you're watching it, are seen as just kind of clueless, mindless. They might be bossed around by their wife, or maybe their kids are always outsmarting them. And so for many, many years, we have viewed that picture's been given to us about dads. And I began that statement by saying maybe it's not entirely false. Maybe oftentimes, lots of times, and I said maybe. Let's just cut to the chase here. The truth is that lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of dads have failed, and failed big time. Really blown it. Leaving their families, making huge mistakes. And so the truth is that oftentimes dads have been, in a sense, clueless and out of the picture. I mean, I'm talking to a group of people, teens, in 2023. No doubt some of you, at least some of you, have gone through messy divorces. You've seen your parents divorce. And no doubt there's somebody in here who spends weekends with dad, or week with mom and a week with dad, and you've seen all kinds of messiness. And you might have cause to say, you know what, I don't like that guy, or he's done this or hasn't done that. And maybe you've got some reason. But what we will find today, and I do not mind telling you this ahead of time, although it is somewhat anticlimactic, the truth is that God tells us to honor our parents, right? Our father and our mother, which we'll look at in just a moment. But let me read something to you from 2 Timothy chapter 3. You do not need to turn there. But Paul wrote to Timothy, but know this in 2 Timothy chapter 3, that in the last days, perilous times will come. How will we know those perilous times? For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power, and from such people turn away. In that list of perilous people, perilous types of people, perilous times, and the people that would populate those perilous times, what's an indicator to us? Well, there are lots of descriptive words in there, but one of the characteristics is that the people during that perilous time, during the last days, would be disobedient to parents. Imagine including disobedience to parents among lovers of self, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power. Imagine including disobedience to parents in that list. And yet, that is exactly what God has done through the Apostle Paul. He included disobedience to parents as a characteristic of the last days that are described for us as perilous times, perilous days. So God, we can gather from that God wants us to be obedient to our parents. Now, I will very quickly say that is obviously within reason. And here's what I mean within reason. As long as it is honoring to God. Because the truth is that there are parents, you've heard the stories, parents that have tried to lead their kids away from the Lord. And that would be the only place that we would stop, where we say, wait a minute, that is sinning against God, what you're asking me to do, or dishonoring to the Lord, and I can't go that far. I love you, and I want to honor you, and I want to obey you. But I can't go so far as to dishonor God, and so we must be careful in that. But barring that, the scriptures really commend or challenge us to honor our parents, no matter what, which we'll see in a little while. But what a contrast those verses are to Genesis chapter 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. So he tells us there to honor our parents. And it's the first, Jesus said that it's the first promise, or wait, I'm sorry. No, was it Paul? I'm sorry. I cannot remember right now at the moment if it was Jesus or Paul. But one of them said that we should honor our mother and father because it's the first commandment with a promise. It's the first commandment with a promise. So as you're going through those commandments, those 10 commandments, you come to the fifth. It's the first one with a promise attached to it. And the promise was long life. In Genesis chapter 6 begins the story of Noah. And we are told in verse 9, if I can call your attention there to Genesis chapter 6, verse 9. It says in verse 9, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Thus the title and the artwork of our study this morning, The Walking Dad, which sometimes they are the walking dead, aren't they? The Walking Dad. In our study this morning, we are actually going to go through 4 chapters of Noah's life. 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we're going to read every single verse. So just prepare for a 3-hour study, okay? No, we're not doing that. We will look at highlights in these chapters as far as they pertain to his position, his fatherhood. Let me see if I can get to the next slide. I might need some help from Nathan back there because this doesn't seem to be working. There we are. Genesis chapter 6. And here's what we find here in verse 9 again, that Noah was just and that he was perfect. Now some of you go, there it is. My dad totally blew it. He's not just and he's not perfect, that's for sure. But what do these words mean? We need to take a little closer look. And so when it says that Noah was a just man, it means that he was righteous or that he was fair in his dealings. And what does it mean for him to be perfect? Does that mean that he was sinless? Those of you that know the life of Noah, by the time we get to chapter 9, just a few short chapters later, you know that Noah is not perfect. So it doesn't mean perfection as far as being sinless. What does it mean? It means wholeness or sound, or we might use the word mature. The individual is mature. If you think about your grandfather, if he's mature, you might use that biblical word perfect. He's perfect. Now you know that he's not perfect, again, in the sense that he's sinless, but he's mature. And so this man Noah was righteous and he was whole or sound or mature. And it says in his generations as it compared to the generations that he had lived and was living in. But obviously he transcends that. He would be considered a righteous individual today, a perfect or sound individual today. And then it says in verse 9 that Noah walked with God. Noah walked with God. And in verse 10, Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, which might make you a little bit hungry this morning, and Japheth. The earth in verse 11 was also corrupt before God. So immediately we've got this contrast. We've got Noah the just, Noah the perfect, Noah who walked with God. And then in verse 11, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So God looked upon the earth, indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. So in this dark, this bleak setting, and those of you that know the story of Noah know that this is the introduction to the great flood, the worldwide flood. And why was there a worldwide flood? Well, that is because people on the earth were so very wicked. And against that dark backdrop, comes this shining star of a man, Noah, who was just, who was perfect, who walked with God. Now, when we get to verse 13, that is where we begin to get some points here. And I'm going to try that again, and it's just not working. So maybe my batteries were messed up, but maybe we can get Nathan to help us out one more time there. Let's see while I mess with these batteries. He listens to God. The man who walks with God listens to God. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you several traits or characteristics of an individual, and obviously we're talking specifically about a dad this morning who walks with God. And these are characteristics that we see in Noah. And, in a sense, what we're doing is we're comparing your dad to Noah. And again, you might go, no way, man, my dad is nowhere near Noah. That's okay. That's okay. That's a goal for your own dad. But what are you supposed to do about that, right? As we go through these characteristics and you go, well, you know what? My dad doesn't listen to God. Okay, well, now you know how to pray for your dad. And you begin to pray for him and say, Lord, help him to listen to you, okay? But let's see a couple of other things in this passage. So verse 13, and God said to Noah. Now, I like this, okay? This individual that walks with God, the walking dad, is going to be someone that listens to God. And we see right away in verse 13 that God spoke to Noah. Now, he spoke to Noah because he knew that Noah would listen. God speaks to the man who listens. God speaks to the man who listens. And Noah was a man that listened to God, and so God spoke to him. Now, we want that same thing for your dad. And I realize, again, I'm talking to a mix of people. Some of you have fantastic dads. Some of you, not so much. But if you've got a fantastic dad, this is an attribute, a characteristic that you ought to be thankful for. And if you've got a dad that doesn't listen to God, well, now you know how to pray. If you're a young man, now you know what a dad ought to do. A dad ought to listen to God. So as you grow older and you begin to have your own kids, scary thought, but as you begin to do that, you want to be a dad that listens to God. Okay? Now we listen to God, and in the process of listening to God, he receives instruction. Can I get that on the screen, Nathan, please? Verse 13, and God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So he's given some instruction here. Make yourself, in verse 14, an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. That means that was a sealant. And in verse 15, this is how you shall make it. In verse 16, you shall make a window for the ark. In several places here, Noah is given instructions by God to make an ark and to make specific things on the ark. When you get to verse 18, he receives more instruction. Verse 18, but I will establish my covenant, that's my agreement, with you, Noah. And you shall go into the ark, more instructions, and look at this. You, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives, that would be daughters-in-law, with you. So again, God listens to Noah. God speaks. He will listen to Noah. But Noah listens to God, rather. And as Noah listens to God, he receives instruction. That is what a good dad does. He receives his instructions from the Lord. Not from anywhere else. I point that out because some of us may grow frustrated with our dads. Because it might be that you really want to do A, B, C, or X, Y, Z. You want to do this thing. And you go to your mom and you go to your dad. You go to your mom, what does mom say? Talk to your dad. And you go talk to your dad's like, no way you're not taking off to go do that. Oh, but dad, come on, what's the matter? No. Listen, son, listen, daughter, that would be dishonoring to the Lord. The word of God says such and such. Oh man, come on, you're so old-fashioned, don't you? Everybody from church is doing it, why can't I do it? No. And then he'll drop one of these on you. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Who are you, Joshua, or whatever, But your dad receives his instructions from the Lord. If he does, that's a good thing. Because the Lord is going to speak to the person that's listening. He is going to share information with the individual that is listening. Now, it goes on in verse 22, and we find out that the walking dad not only listens to God in chapter 6, but also responds to God. There it is. Thus Noah did. According to all that God commanded him, so he did. The dad who walks with God is going to respond to God. Not just listen to him and go, okay, yeah, those are great instructions. No, I'm not doing that. He's going to receive those instructions, and then he's going to respond to God in a positive way. Now, I want to pause here again for just a moment. I've got to be careful here because I was loving all of these characteristics while at the same time measuring myself against Noah and thinking, oh man, I totally, as a dad, I totally blew it on that, totally blew it on that, totally blew it on that. But this is a wonderful one here. Noah, again, when we read through the Bible, you and I, especially if you're on a Bible reading plan, like read through the Bible in a year, I'm not discouraging you from doing that, but I always caution people, be careful. The goal of reading your Bible is to build your faith. Okay? Not just to finish. And if we're reading for speed sake, then we might find ourselves missing God. Slow it down when you're reading. Look for God in there. But here's one of these times when I think that we miss the impact of all of this. I want you to consider what Noah, now I realize we skipped over a whole bunch because we're not looking at the building of the ark and all of those details. But I want you to think about this. Many of you have seen the modern day ark, right? Over in, where's it at? Where? Kentucky. Thank you very much. Kentucky. Okay? And you've seen how big it is. It is modeled after the measurements that we find in the Bible. So it's a huge ark. It's a huge boat. I want you to consider this, that Noah was given instructions on how to build it. Top to bottom, end to end, side to side, pitch and wood and all the different things that he had to build. And then what happens is we get all of those instructions, and then we get down to verse 22, and it says, thus Noah did. And we go, okay. It makes it sound like when he got to verse 22, okay, give me all the instructions, blueprint, okay, yeah, I see, okay, yeah, it's going to take hundreds of years, great, done. Understand that this would have required work day and night. Day and night. It reminds us that a dad who walks with God is going to respond to God, yes, but it also reminds us that a dad who walks with God is going to be a hard-working dad. Paul, writing to the Thessalonians in chapter 2, verse 9, one of my favorite passages there, he says this, for you remember, brethren, our labor and toil, laboring night and day, that we might not be a burden to you, we preach to you the gospel of God. Well, Paul pointing out that he was laboring and toiling night and day. And there are so many dads who do that. Maybe sometimes they do it a little too much. But so many dads do that. Is that your dad? Is that your dad? Is he a hard worker? Does he wake early to go to work and then stay late? Does he work overtime to be able to pay for that family vacation that you'll be going on this summer? To pay for your sports, uniforms, cleats, rackets, equipment? Does he work overtime to be able to pay for your camps, your mission trips, your church events? Does he repair things around the home, replacing lights, plunging the toilet, checking that roof, fixing the garage door that your mom told him about, yard work, fixing the sprinklers, fixing the lawnmower, painting, leaky faucets, paying bills, insurance, electricity, gas, water, the car, medical bills, taxes? Does he care for the cars in the family, washing them, checking the oil, changing the oil, checking for those noises that you heard when you were driving around the block? Flat tires, did he tell you how to change one of those? Teaching you how to drive? Imagine for just a moment getting in the car with yourself while you were driving. Terrifying. Can you imagine? And he doesn't have his own brake pedal on that side. Is he a problem solver? When there's family problems with the neighbors, problems with friends? Is he a decision maker when you just have to have that cute little puppy that you saw? Does he have to make those hard decisions? Most dads do things that will never be noticed, and thus they are overlooked and underappreciated. Is that your dad? Is that your dad? Noah was a man who worked hard, putting all of his time and effort into building this ark because it was what God had called him to do. Let's move on to Genesis chapter 7, where we find that the man who walks with God leads his family. Verse 1, then the Lord said to Noah, come into the ark, you and all your household, because I have seen that you are righteous before me in this generation. I like that God says there, come into the ark, as if God is already in the ark, and he says, come on in. There's room in here. But notice what he says, come into the ark, you and all your household. And why? It is because Noah was recognized as being righteous before God in this generation, he says. In this dark time, Noah, you are a shining light, and I want you to come into this ark. In verses 2 and 3, he begins to give him instructions about the animals. We all know that they were to go 2 by 2, right? Did you know that there were also groups of 7s? It's for a different study, different time. But look at verse 4. For after 7 more days, I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made. And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him. Verse 6, Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters were on the earth. Verse 7, so Noah and with his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. What do we find there? That the man that walks with God leads his family, first of all, into safety. Is that your dad? That's this dad. I'm always looking around, watching everybody. I'll share a strange little fact about me. Not that you care. But whenever I go into a room or we're going to be sitting down at a restaurant table or whatever, I always have to have I need to be able to have my eyes facing toward the door. Never put your back to the door, okay? Now, I don't know how you're going to do that with your family next time, like, hey, we all need to sit on this side, but I always want to watch that door. I want to watch outside the windows as I'm trying to enjoy my meal because I want to know if somebody's coming in with a rifle, with a gun, with a bomb, with a rocket launcher. If they're flying a jet into the restaurant, I want to know about it. I want to know what's coming. I want to try my best to be prepared. I do that everywhere that I'm at, but obviously, especially with my family. Always want to be on the lookout. I tell my family just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean no one's watching. I'm always on the lookout. If I go outside, I'm looking to see which cars are parked. Whose car is that? I don't recognize that car. Who's in that car? I don't recognize that car. I know the cars that are in my neighborhood, on my street, around me. I'm looking every time I come out of the house. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm looking around, like who's out there and what's going on, and what's that car, and why, what are they doing, and why are they parked there, and what's happening, and hey, be careful of this, watch out for that, and I'm always on the lookout. Noah was a dad that led his family into safety. The man that walks with God is going to lead his family into safety. If your dad does that, that's not something to be embarrassed about or ashamed of. Oh man, why does he always have to do such and such? Because he's doing his best to look out for you. Why does he always have to, check this or check that, or, do these things or call these people or whatever? Why does he always have to do that? Because he's doing his best to lead his family into safety. But we move on to something even more important than safety. In verse 23 of Genesis chapter 7, we find that he leads his family into salvation. Verse 23. So he destroyed all living things. Now understand again that we're skipping large sections here. In between this, the flood came. And the flood killed everyone on earth. And in verse 23 it says, so he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground. That's God. God did that. Noah didn't do that. God did that. Both man and cattle. Creeping thing, which some of you may be really excited about, and bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with them in the ark remained alive. Noah led his family into salvation. John wrote in 3 John 1 verse 4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Is that your dad? Is he always trying to talk to you about the Lord? Always encouraging, always giving you a Bible verse? Hey, you need to follow the Lord, man. You need to pray to the Lord. You need to walk with the Lord. You need to keep your eyes on the Lord. Every birthday card you get, it says something about the Lord in there. So you always pray and pray for you that you would follow the Lord. He's always encouraging you to get to church. Go to church. I'll take you. I'll drop you off. Sign up for this event. Go to that camp. I had a dad recently call me and tell me this. He said, I will do whatever it takes to get my kids to that event. He told me, if I have to, we will eat beans and rice for the month to be able to afford this event for my kids. Is that your dad? Always encouraging you, always pushing you toward the Lord? And sometimes you feel, oh, come on, man, I already know, get off my back, come on. A man that walks with God is going to do that. He's going to lead his family into safety, but more importantly, into salvation. Making sure that you're saved, Are you sure you're saved, If you committed your life to the Lord, that's a good thing. This theme or this topic of leading his family into salvation carries into Genesis chapter 8. See how quickly we're moving? Look at Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark, and God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. God remembered Noah because he was obedient, because he had followed the Lord, because he had led his family. He had led them into safety, led them into salvation. Now, it goes on in verses 2 through 5 to describe the water situation there and where the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. And that's another topic for another time for us to argue over and hate each other. We'll do that some other time. But we move in or down a little bit further into Genesis chapter 8. Look at verse 6, because we find here our next section, and that is this, that the man that walks with God waits wisely. The dad who walks with God waits wisely. Verse 6. So it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window. There was only one window. Opened the window. Sounds like my office. Of the ark which he had made. Then he sent out a raven, which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. He also sent out from himself a dove to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and drew her into the ark to himself. But again in verse 10, and he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent the dove out from the ark. Then the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. So he waited yet another 7 days and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him any more. Is that your dad? Like, he just takes so long to do things. Why can't he just do, come on, just hurry up. This is what I need done. I need this. And can't you just, get it done right now? But is your dad like Noah? I like this one. He waits, as he's waiting wisely, literally Noah tested the waters. The dad who walks with God is going to test the waters. Is it safe to go out? Is it the right time? Are they the right conditions? A dad who does this type of thing is a dad who loves his family. And he's going to do his best to lead his family in the right direction, into safety, into salvation. But that will require waiting wisely, and waiting wisely sometimes requires testing the waters. Let me see if it's right to go out or not. Let me see what's happening out there. Some dads are the types of dads that in the rain will say, hey, wait right here, I'll go get the car. And they will go out and literally test the water, go get the car, bring it back so that everybody is able to get into the car at least somewhat dry. Is that the kind of dad you have? That's a dad who walks with God, and that's a good thing. But I love that Noah here waited and waited. He sent out the bird, got the bird back. And he's like, you know what? We're just going to wait another 7 days. We got enough food. Probably thought, it smells a little bit in the ark, but whatever. We got enough food. Well, let's just go to another level. Not a big deal, and let's just wait for the Lord. And that's exactly what happened, because in verse 15, we are told that in waiting wisely, not only does he test the waters, but he takes steps of faith. Verse 15, then God spoke to Noah. And this is what he said. Go out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons and your sons' wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with them. Every animal, every creeping thing, every bird, and whatever creeps on the earth, according to their families, went out of the ark. And so he moved as God led. He took steps of faith. He tested the waters, and he waited until he knew, okay, I think the waters are gone, and then he waited for God's instructions to come. Okay, go out of the ark, now's the time. That is a wonderful characteristic of the dad who walks with God, the walking dad, who waits for God to lead. And I'll be the first to say that God takes entirely too long for my liking. I mean, I've got a schedule. I've got important things to do. Why does God have to wait so long to do things? But God's timing is perfect, isn't it? And when I remember that, I correct myself and say, hey, knock it off. We're operating on God's time. Does your dad do that? And sometimes it just seems like, man, why does he take so long to do things? Can we dig a swimming pool or can't we? What's the problem? What's the holdup, man? But he's considering all that goes into that. You just want to have a party and have all of your friends over. What's the big deal? It's just going to be, a little bit of food and a little bit of music and hanging out and video games. What's the problem? But dad is considering all that entails. What needs to be done? And how he can keep everybody there safe and yet be a blessing to you in the process. And so he's considering all of that. There's another part to this here. Not only does he wait wisely, but he worships God. In verse 20, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. So because Noah gets out, and look, I want you to see what Noah does. It seems as if immediately as Noah leaves the ark, he takes those animals, took of every clean animal and every clean bird, and gave offerings to the Lord. So first thing he does, as soon as he sets his foot on safe ground, he's thinking, I need to thank God, and he does that with sacrifices. I told you earlier, again, this is not a study of the flood as a whole, but we're told that some animals went in 2 by 2, others there were groups of 7. And so there were animals enough to be able to sacrifice, but enough to leave to go and continue breeding and having other animals to repopulate the earth. But here we see that the man that walks with God worships God, and he does that with sacrifice, giving of his own resources. And sometimes it may seem like, you know what, Dad, like why are you giving your time or your money to the church or giving it to the Lord or giving it to these people? You know, that's taking from what's ours. But Dad sees the importance of sacrificing to God and not just giving God just, well, you know what, I got a little bit of leftover, I got some tax return, chump change. God, you can have that. But he sees the value in giving his best to the Lord. That is a wonderful characteristic to have. He worships God, and he does so with sacrifice. Let's finish up in Genesis chapter 9. Where in Genesis chapter 9 we see the next trait of a man that walks with God, a walking dad. We see that he fulfills God's purpose. Number 1, verse 1. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. He goes on to give that command to the animals also. What he's saying is, listen, everybody on earth has been destroyed, Noah. And so it's time for your family to begin having kids because the earth needs to be repopulated. Imagine what a privilege that would be for God to come and say, listen, everybody on earth has been wiped out. You're the only family left. And I want to start or restart society, the world's population, from your family because I like you so much. Imagine that. For God to come to your family and say, listen, there's no one else left. Only the Smith family. And I like you guys so much that I want to use you to repopulate the earth. Imagine that. Incredible. But that's the privilege that Noah has here in fulfilling God's purpose. In verse 7, it says, and as for you, he tells them the same thing again, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply in it. So Noah and his family are given this wonderful privilege of working for God, serving God in this manner. The dad who walks with God, the walking dad, is going to experience this same blessing, the privilege of serving God, walking with God, serving God in some capacity, a calling on dad's life that becomes the calling of the family's life. Today, many of us will be leaving for summer camp. We'll be there until Wednesday. We'll be back for Wednesday night, or at least I will be, hopefully, God willing. We don't get lost out there. But we'll be back. But it's going to be a really fun camp. Might be a cold camp, but it's going to be a fun camp. But my youngest daughter is going with us. She's going to help her mom because her mom is doing all of the cooking. And so my youngest daughter will be there to assist her, to serve alongside of her. She grew up going to these camps before she was even old enough to go. and went through all of the camps, junior high and high school camps and all the different things. And now here she is at the tender age of almost 22, and she's back to help out and to serve the Lord alongside of her family. That's what we want. That's what we want to see. Here, this family was called upon to serve God in this wonderful, wonderful way. Did I not put, I'm sorry, did I miss one? You fulfilled God's purpose. I didn't put that up there, did I? Okay, so if you are taking notes, before falls occasionally, sorry about that, we'll get to that in just a minute. Before that, I had fulfills God's purpose. The walking dad fulfills God's purpose. And now we will look at, finally, the walking dad falls occasionally. This is an episode that we could have easily skipped over. I could have said, okay, that's the end of our study time on Noah. He was basically the perfect human being. But this is a part of Noah's life. This is a part of every dad's life. And obviously it goes without saying, it's a part of everyone's life. But let's see what happens in verse 20, where we find out that the walking dad that walks with God falls occasionally. And Noah began to be a farmer in verse 20. And he planted a vineyard. That's grapes. Then he drank of the wine from those grapes and was drunk. And he became uncovered in his tent. In other words, he got drunk, and he, somewhere in the process, took off all of his clothing. So he's in his tent without any clothing on. And in verse 22, it says that Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, something happens in there, which is not clear. There are all sorts of theories and conjectures and the possibilities, but it doesn't say. So there's no way that I can say. I do not know what happens, but Ham gets in trouble for whatever it was that he did. We'll look at that in just a moment, but understand that Ham comes in and he sees the nakedness of Noah, his father. And he goes out, he does something, but he goes out and tells his brothers. And look at verse 23. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine, or from being drunk, and knew what his younger son Ham had done to him. It's always the younger one, isn't it? Then he said, "Cursed be Canaan." That's Ham's son. "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren." And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." Verse 27, "May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." So 3 times he announces this curse on Canaan, the son of Ham. Now, why is that real quickly? This is not really part of the study or along the lines, but I'll mention it very quickly. Why does Canaan get cursed? He didn't do anything. It was his dad. Well, what Noah's not doing is he's not saying, okay, I'm going to punish your son because of your, whatever it was that you did, Ham. What he's doing in announcing this curse on Canaan is he's saying, look, Canaan's dad, Ham, obviously is bad fruit. Obviously not a good individual. Obviously not a good dad. And sadly, because of that, Canaan is going to suffer because of his dad's leadership. Lack of good leadership. That's what's going on there. But I want to finish with this. Every dad fails occasionally. Every dad. This dad, I'm an expert at failing. Every dad fails occasionally. Here's the question I have for you as we finish. If every dad fails occasionally, how about your dad? And when your dad fails, are you Ham, Shem, or Japheth? And when your dad fails occasionally, is he covered by his family? Does his family come to his rescue? Or do you forget the other 10 million things that he's done well and focus on the one thing that he messed up on? You see, you and I have a command. And the command is in Genesis 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Honor your father and your mother. I want you to note what's missing. Honor your father as long as he's a perfect father. Is that what it says? Family, is that what it says? No. Honor your father as long as he gives you everything you want. Does it say that? Family, come on, does it say that? No. Honor your father as long as he gives you a ride to the mall whenever you're ready. Doesn't say that either. This command from God in Genesis chapter 20, honor your father, it's unconditional. Do it. Not do it if, but just do it. Do it if your dad's around and he's a great dad. Do it if dad's not around and he's not a great dad. Do it if dad's around but he's not so great. There's no condition there. Do it as long as your father and mother are worthy of honor. No, we're just told we need to honor our father and our mother. It's a command from God, unconditional. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 17, the writer of Hebrews wrote this: obey those who rule over you and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that would be unprofitable for you. Obey those who rule over you, your father included. I want you to see what he says. Be submissive, for they watch out for your souls. Let me ask you a question, family. Whose soul are you responsible for? Your own. And for many of us, that's the only soul we really care about. I want you to consider the list that I read off earlier of all the things that oftentimes go unnoticed, unseen by us, that dads do. The repairing of things, the maintaining of things, the gas that they're putting in the vehicles, the bills that they're paying, the sacrifices that they're making. On top of that, they have the responsibility of not only caring for their own soul, but also for the souls of their family. Now, pray tell me, could you handle all of that? And could you do it perfectly? Not a chance. Not a chance. Our dads often, perfect or imperfect as they may be, have so much weighing on their shoulders, on their minds, on their hearts. And yet so often we can find ourselves so unthankful, no gratitude whatsoever, because they did not do the one thing that we wanted them to do. Family, we need to take notice this year. You've got a week to prepare. Bless your dad. Bless your dad. If he's a great dad, but even if he's not a great dad. Maybe you don't even know where he is. I mean, what can you do, really? But take these things to heart and say, hey, I don't like what's happened to me, but I'm going to do better for my future family. But maybe dad's not around, but you know where he is. Send him a letter. Send him a card. Give him a phone call. Say, hey, listen, I love you. I know you're not perfect. I know you messed up. All those things, yeah, whatever, but I love you. And I appreciate whatever you have done. Whatever, even if it's a little bit, hey, I appreciate that little bit because you've got some kind of memory there. Father, thank you so much.